you tune in hoping to get a handle on something important, really cut through all the noise. Today, that something is the truly critical and frankly heartbreaking situation that's unfolding right now in El-Fasher and the areas around it in Sudan.
Yeah.
We're going to take a really close look at what's happening, especially those recent devastating attacks on displacement camps, places like Zamzam.
Right, Zamzam is key here.
Exactly. So to do this, we've pulled together quite a range of information. We've got news reports, Middle East Eye, The Guardian.
Reliable source.
Really crucial firsthand accounts from humanitarian groups like Relief International, Doctors Without Borders, MSF.
Also Islamic Relief, UN, OCS, INESO reports too. It's essential on-the-ground perspectives.
Definitely. And the human rights angle from groups like Article 19, plus even some aggregated stuff from social media, just trying to get a fuller picture.
It helps piece things together.
Our aim here is, pretty straightforward. Distill what exactly is going on, why it matters so much, and what the terrible human cost is for the people caught right in the middle of it all.
And what immediately jumps out, I think, as you start digging into these reports, is just the scale of the threat to El-Fasher itself.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the capital of North Darfur. Crucially, it's the last major stronghold for the Sudanese Armed Forces, the SA, in the whole western part of Sudan.
The last way.
And right now, this city, which has, over 1 million people, it's facing a very real, very imminent advance.
Exactly. The paramilitary rapid support forces, the RSF, and maybe just to quickly clarify, this is the other major force fighting the Safi. They are pushing towards El-Fasher.
Right.
And it's not just being seen as, a standard military move. We're hearing from Sudan's foreign minister, Ali Yusuf al-Sharif. He's stating that the RSF offensive seems deliberately timed to coincide with the big international aid conference. And the alleged goal, he says, is they capture El-Fasher and then, boom, declare a parallel government.
Wow, so the political stakes are massive, too.
Hugely. And when you think about that, the stakes for the civilians trapped there are just incredibly high. They're pleading for protection.
And it's even more precarious because the SF itself, they're really struggling to get supplies into El-Fasher.
Right.
There were these worrying reports suggesting the RSF might have even shot down SF aircraft.
Really?
Yeah, which would further isolate the city, isolate anyone trying to defend it. So you just get this sense of a major city totally on a knife edge.
Facing this, determined and seemingly quite powerful advancing force. Okay, so let's zoom in a bit then on the absolutely horrific events reported from those displacement camps just outside El-Fasher, specifically Zamzam and Abu Shouk. The eyewitness accounts coming out are, truly devastating, detailing what sounds like just indiscriminate killings by RSF fighters.
Zamzam camp in particular, the reports suggest it's been the scene of just unspeakable violence. Al-Sadiq El-Nur, he's a spokesman for a faction of the Sudan Liberation Movement.
One of the groups fighting alongside the SF.
Exactly. He reported at least 450 residents killed. And he used the phrase, a barbaric attack and ethnic cleansing.
Gosh. That phrase, given the history of Darfur, that carries enormous, terrifying weight.
It really, really does. And the personal stories, they paint an even more sort of visceral picture.
Like Muhammad Adam.
Yeah, Muhammad Adam, a resident who managed to get out, escaped to El-Fasher. He recounted scenes of just absolute terror.
What did she describe?
He talked about young men being killed, homes deliberately burned down, widespread rape, people forced out of the camp.
Oh, my God.
He described dozens of children killed inside a Quranic school. Just no mercy shown. According to him, the fighters were even verbally abusing people, dehumanizing them as they did it.
That's just hard to comprehend.
And tragically, we also have confirmation from Relief International. They were, heartbreakingly, the last ones providing critical health services in Zamzam.
The last ones.
Yeah, they confirmed the merciless killing of 9 of our colleagues, their entire staff at that last clinic, killed.
9 aid workers. The whole team.
The whole team. So it's not just the loss of life. It's the complete dismantling of the support system for the most vulnerable people there.
And this isn't just based on individual stories, right? There's other evidence.
Well, yeah. What's really stark is that we're seeing visual confirmation, satellite images.
From space.
Yeah, they clearly show widespread damage across Zamzam. You can see signs of fires. It really just underscores the sheer magnitude of what happened there.
And it wasn't only Zamzam, was it? Abu Shouk camp, too.
Unfortunately, no. Abu Shouk, that's north of El-Fasher. A coordinator for displaced Sudanese there reported nearly 30 people killed by RSF shelling.
Shelling into a displacement camp.
Exactly. And there are these deeply concerning accusations that the RSF is deliberately targeting civilians, maybe even, disturbingly, using them as, quote, human shields.
And the violence is spreading beyond the camps.
It seems so. Activists reported that in Kadada, which is a town northeast of El-Fasher, at least 56 other people were killed just, Thursday, Friday last week. So like April 10th, 11th.
So it's a pattern, a wider pattern of attacks impacting civilians across the area.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. And to really grasp the deep fear and the historical weight of all this, you really have to look back.
The history of the RSF.
Exactly. The RSF, as we know it now, grew out of the Janjaweed militias.
And for anyone maybe not familiar, those are the militias responsible for the genocide in Darfur back in, 2003 to 2005?
That's right. A history marked by just extreme violence, systematic targeting of specific ethnic groups.
Which makes that quote from El-Sadiq al-Nur even more chilling, when he said the RSF's current aim is to displace indigenous people and cause wide demographic change in Darfur.
It's a direct echo. It echoes the stated goals and, frankly, the horrific results of that earlier genocide. So the fear that history is repeating itself is, it's palpable. It's very real for people there.
And it's not just local voices saying this, is it? The U.S. government has weighed in before.
Yes, the U.S. has previously, formally, called atrocities by the RSF genocide. They've even sanctioned its leader, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, Hamedi.
So there's international recognition of their track record.
A very stark international assessment. Yeah.
And we're hearing from people on the ground, like Adam Issa.
Right, the resident using Starlink.
Yeah, he's expressing this deep fear of a repeat of what happened in El Geneina just last year, where thousands were killed. Those memories, those past horrors, they're clearly fueling the panic now, the desperate pleas for help.
And all of this just paints a picture of a truly, truly dire humanitarian catastrophe unfolding. And it's important to remember, North Darfur was already incredibly fragile before these latest attacks.
Right, the World Food Program.
Exactly. WFP had already reported famine conditions in several areas, including Zamzam itself.
Famine before this attack.
Yes. So you have a population already right on the brink.
And now, mass displacement from Zamzam. What are the numbers?
Potentially huge. Maybe up to 400,000 people fleeing. Fleeing to El-Fasher, Tawila, other areas nearby.
400,000 people on the move.
And MSF, Doctors Without Borders. They report people arriving in just desperate conditions. Severely dehydrated, totally exhausted, no supplies, nothing.
And the places they're fleeing to must be overwhelmed.
Immense strain on already limited resources. We're hearing about severe shortages of absolutely everything: food, clean water, shelter, medical supplies.
And as you said, the last clinic in Zamzam.
Gone. That Relief International clinic being destroyed means that last lifeline for critical health services inside Zamzam is just tragically lost.
And the knock-on effects.
Well, the water supply in Abu Shouk has reportedly been cut off now, too. Plus, there are critical fuel shortages.
Which impact
everything. It disrupts the water services that are still working, and it severely hinders delivery of what little aid might be trying to get through. It's a cascading crisis. One problem just makes another one worse.
It's also just deeply, deeply troubling to see aid workers themselves being targeted.
Oh, absolutely. The loss of those 9 released international staff in Zamzam is just an absolute tragedy.
Yep.
And INSO, the NGO safety organization, they reported the killing of 10 Sudanese aid workers.
10 more.
10 more, operating a health facility in Zamzam. And INSO's also tracked nearly 200 separate incidents targeting civilians and aid workers just in North Darfur, just since the start of this year.
200 incidents. It's not just accidental crossfire then.
It seems unlikely to be just that. There are really concerning reports that fighters are actively preventing aid access, blocking help from reaching people.
And MSF had to pull out of Zamzam earlier.
Yeah, they were forced to suspend their activities back in February. The security situation just got too dangerous, so the very groups trying to help are being hit, forced out.
Adding another layer of just difficulty and horror to this is the communication blackout, right?
Yeah, the crippling news and communication blackout across much of Sudan. It's been going on for a while, but really took hold significantly around early February 2024.
And Islamic Relief really highlighted how devastating this is on so many levels.
It's not just, not being able to call loved ones, which is awful in itself.
Right.
But it stops vital food aid. The systems for transferring money, confirming deliveries, they're all down.
Basic banking, payment.
All disrupted. And crucially, like you'd imagine, it stops people calling for help when attacks are actually happening.
Yeah, absolutely critical. And The Guardian reported on families of people displaced from Zamzam just desperate for news.
Desperate, struggling to find out anything about their relatives, if they're safe, where they are. That lack of information creates just immense anxiety. And it also makes any kind of coordinated response incredibly difficult.
Yeah. From a broader view, how can anyone, aid groups, journalists, verify information or coordinate help effectively with this blackout?
It's like trying to respond to a disaster in complete darkness. It severely undermines everything.
So what about the international response? Has there been any?
Well, it's worth noting there was an international aid conference recently held in London.
Okay.
And the UN humanitarian coordinator, Clementine Salami, she has made strong calls for an immediate end to hostilities.
Strong calls, but tangible impact.
Well, that's the crucial question, isn't it? Article 19, the human rights group we mentioned, they've pointed out the deeply concerning lack of sustained international attention this crisis seems to compared to other global events. They even called it a silent war.
A silent war. That really says something about how it feels like it's maybe not being prioritized on the world stage.
And that relative lack of attention, unfortunately, it does raise serious concerns that the actual international response, concrete action, money, diplomatic pressure, has just been woefully inadequate for the sheer scale and urgency of this.
And finally, there's this issue of information itself being manipulated, attacks on journalists.
Yes, and this ties back into the communication blackout, too. Article 19's analysis shows this continued worrying pattern. Violations against freedom of expression, journalists, and human rights defenders being specifically targeted.
Using internet shutdowns as a tool.
Exactly, as a tool of control. And the systematic spread of misinformation, disinformation, reportedly by all sides in the conflict.
How bad is it for journalists?
The Sudanese Journalist Syndicate documented, get this, 353 violations against journalists.
353.
Yeah. And tragically, at least 4 journalists killed.
Killed for doing their jobs.
Seems so. The killing of Khalid Bilal, a media director, back in March last year, specifically because of his journalism. It's a terrifying example of the risks they face.
And the internet shutdowns, as we said, directly hit their ability to work.
Severely impacts them, forces some onto these incredibly risky options, like using Starlink, just to try and get information out. Controlling information is clearly a very deliberate, very damaging tactic here. So as we've gone through all this, hopefully you can really see the immense, almost unimaginable human suffering unfolding in El-Fasher and around it.
Yeah.
We're talking deliberate targeting of civilians, of aid workers.
Yeah.
These deeply disturbing echoes of past genocide, and just this desperate, urgent need for attention and, crucially, for meaningful action.
And, that brings us to a really critical question, I think, for you, for anyone listening to Process. In a world with so many crises demanding attention, what does it actually mean when events this horrific can escalate like this, while much of the world's focus seems to be elsewhere? What's the responsibility, of the international community, sure, but also maybe of us as individuals? How do we respond when the global stage feels so crowded, so overwhelming?
It's a tough question. Perhaps consider taking some time to just look into the work of those humanitarian organizations we mentioned, Relief International, MSF, Islamic Relief. See what they're doing, the challenges they face.
Understand it better.
Yeah. Or maybe just reflecting on the role of information itself in conflict. How its absence, like with this blackout, has such a devastating impact. How crises get understood, or, tragically, how they often don't get fully addressed.
Yeah. This deep dive has made it painfully clear, I think, that the situation in El-Fasher, in Darfur, it's not over, it's ongoing, it's escalating. The human cost is just immense, and it keeps growing.
Absolutely.
Staying informed, even when the news is this difficult, this distressing.
Right.
It really feels like a crucial first step, just understanding and maybe potentially contributing to a response, however that might be possible for each person.